Veterans, especially my older veterans, let's be honest, your body has more complaints than the VA call center. Your joints make noises that aren't medically recognized, and your VA file has been sitting in the system longer than some of the employees. But here's the good news. After you turn 60, the VA system actually opens up some loopholes that work in your favor. It's not illegal, it's not shady, just weird VA rules that help older veterans get higher ratings, faster approvals, and fewer C&P headaches. So today, we're breaking down the top 5 loopholes that veterans over 60 should know. And trust me, number 1 is the loophole almost nobody talks about. But once you know it, you'll wonder why the VA doesn't tattoo it on your C file. Make sure to stick around till the end for an all-new claim advice. I'm Mr. X. I'm the guy behind the guy, giving you all the information you want to know and need to know about the VA claims process. This is the VA Top 5. Loophole number 5, the worsening with age rule, or the functional loss beats range of motion. So here's a loophole that older veterans can absolutely use. The VA must consider how your condition gets worse with age, not just how it looked when you first got rated, let's say back in 1995. So let's say back in 1995, you were rated at 10% for your back. And now you're 60 plus years of age and you can't bend down to tie your shoes anymore without making a noise usually heard during childbirth. So the VA is required to rate, especially when there's increased pain, when there's reduced mobility, when there's instability issues, when there's a fall risk, degenerative changes, flare-ups, even if your range of motion numbers are similar to before. This is because for older veterans, functional loss often outweighs range of motion. So it's kind of like a loophole of sorts. If your joints still technically move, but it hurts like hell, it locks up, it weakens, or it limits your daily life, your rating can increase without, failing the range of motion test. Now, this is one of the biggest secrets older vets don't use. Your pain and decline with age are rateable. You just need to describe your real life examples. So, for example, something like, I can't stand for longer than 10 minutes. I can't walk without stopping. My knees give out. My hand grip is weak. I avoid stairs. The loophole is this. The VA must account for the worsening with age, not just numbers on a chart. Okay, so in layman's terms, and let me break this down again, okay? Let's say your range of motion measurements all come back relatively normal, okay, based on their range of motion. But there is pain, and there is flare-ups and degenerative changes, and it affects other things. The VA has to account for all of the above. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. They may say they account for it, and it may not change your rating, but you and I both know that it should. So, my suggestion here, keep pushing, keep filing for those claims, especially if you're only rated at 10% for your knees, your back, your hips. Okay? Keep pushing. Because those flare-ups, those changes, they're going to show up, especially in that range of motion measurement. And then that increase will be warranted. All right, loophole number 4, the many problems one origin loophole, or the secondary conditions multiply. Now, I talked about this in my previous video. So, veterans over 60 have what I call the chain reaction body. That is, one injury from, let's say, 1978 starts a domino effect that doesn't stop until you're held together with tape, bandages, braces, and ibuprofen. Okay? So if your original injury causes any new conditions as you age, the VA must rate them as secondary. Now, there are some injuries and disabilities that the VA automatically concedes are secondary to the primary one. For example, if you're service connected for a back injury, back disability, and you have the radiculopathy, then the VA will automatically concede that the radiculopathy is due to your back and will grant it if they are granting it for your back and all the information. You have a current diagnosis and everything. And their medical records show that, hey, you have a diagnosed back condition, you have the radiculopathy, they'll grant it all. Now, there's other conditions that could be related to your back condition that the VA doesn't automatically concede as being related. So, those, for example, if you have, hip issues or knee issues as due to your back, they don't automatically concede that. They'll need a secondary opinion. They'll need to request a nexus between the events. Just a couple other examples here. So if you have like knee arthritis, and due to, we'll just say it's your right knee. Due to your right knee, if the arthritis has gotten bad enough to limit your range of motion, and then you start to overcompensate for that lack of range of motion by, adjusting the way that you walk, and that then affects your hips and your back and potentially your other knee because you're favoring your right knee so much. Now, all of those can be secondary conditions. Okay. As I previously mentioned with the back injury, that goes to nerve pain or radiculopathy. For our purposes, it's the same thing. Okay. If I say radiculopathy and nerve pain, it's the same thing. Okay. That leads to mobility issues. All could be related. If you have PTSD or another mental health disability, sleep apnea could be related to that. Hypertension could be related. Heart problems could be related. Chronic pain in any joint that you're service connected for can lead to depression, insomnia, anxiety, and other issues. Foot problems here at the end, I think you get my point. Foot problems lead to knee problems, hip arthritis, and on and on. Now, this loophole matters because a single 10% evaluation for, let's say, your right knee, can increase or can, I don't want to say spread, but, you can have 4 or 5 secondary conditions related to that primary knee. You can have, your hip, your back as secondary to that right knee, and then radiculopathy as secondary to your back, and, mobility issues. It just spirals from there. Okay. And the VA hardly ever explains this, because if they did, well, most of you would probably jump from 40% to 90% overnight. Now, as an older veteran, your body has had decades to deteriorate from the original injury. That's not aging. Now that's the chain reaction damage. And guess what? That chain reaction damage is fully ratable, and that's what I'm talking about. So if you're not service connected for any of the secondary conditions as related to your primary one, then I would apply for that yesterday. If not yesterday, then today. And if not today, then tomorrow. Okay? Because all of the chain reaction, that's going to put you closer to or in that 100 club. The number 3 loophole, I'm calling it the I don't need to prove exposure anymore loophole. Okay, now this one hits hard for veterans 60 and up. But frankly, if it applies to you, then you could be 20 and up and it would still apply. Okay? Now, whether you're in the Vietnam era, Cold War era, Desert Storm, okay, Gulf War era, it all applies. And now the VA has implemented presumptive laws where you don't have to prove exposure anymore. So, if you served, or if you were exposed to Agent Orange, if you're exposed to burn pits, Gulf War toxins, radiation, contaminated water, and that's contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. I should preface that. Now, there's certain bases with documented hazards, chemical solvents, industrial fumes, airborne particulate matter, and then Terra on top of all of this. Now, Terra isn't presumptive, but that's a whole separate thing. Go watch my Terra video if you haven't seen it thus far. For older veterans, the loophole is simple. If your illness appears on a presumptive list and you served in the right location, then the VA must connect it. No nexus letter is needed, no proof of exposure, no arguing with the C&P examiner who looks like they're fresh out of high school. Okay? This rule massively benefits older veterans because many exposure diseases don't show up until you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s. Heck, I saw a file a couple weeks ago where a veteran who was in their 80s was granted service connection for diabetes due to exposure in the Republic of Vietnam. Okay? Point is, doesn't matter how old, doesn't matter when, if you're diagnosed with a condition, you served in that area, then it can get service connected. Great news is the VA finally admits it. Yeah, So if you have questions, concerns about whether the area you served is presumptive to any and all of these conditions, drop me a comment. Okay? Let me know what questions or concerns you have about what may or may not be presumptive. This is all contained in 38 CFR 3.309, 3.317, 3.320. Okay? Now, those are the ones mainly for herbicide exposure, Gulf War toxins, and the like. But it's all in that rough general area. The number 2 loophole, I'm calling it the age removes barriers loophole. Exams get easier over 60. Okay? Now here's something wild. Once you're over 60, the VA becomes a little less strict about C&P exams. Not because they like you, but because the medical science and the VA regulations recognize aging naturally worsens disability. So older veterans, they benefit from fewer exams, reduced frequency of reevaluations, more credibility when reporting symptoms, less skepticism about progression. I would say there's more leniency in symptom severity, less expectations for physical performance, and the benefit of the doubt actually being used. You know, when you're 25, the VA expects you to run a marathon, lift a truck, and do cartwheels before they call it moderate pain. At 65, I know there's many that are going to argue and say, well, at 65, they said the same thing. But I've also seen many, many cases where, you know, they actually do all of the above. They listen to what you're saying. They're looking at the evidence. So when you say that your back hurts and you get out of bed and the VA goes, okay, fair enough. You know, that means that your own symptom report, the words that come into your mouth carry more weight. Also, being a little bit older too, you know, generally if you've been seeing a doctor for 5, 10, 20 years, then there's more of that continuity shown in your medical records, which gives more value to what you say as long as it aligns with what's in your file. Now, if you try to embellish things to your benefit, I'd recommend not doing that. 2, the doctor can read right through that based on what's in your records. But if you're straight with them, with your symptoms, what's in your records and everything, then there should be fewer issues. So your pain, your fatigue, your instability, dizziness, breathing issues, if you express them clearly, raters must consider them. Number 1, the 55-year rule and or protected ratings, fewer reductions, more increases. Now this one, I'm going to be honest with you, it's kind of hit and miss. Some people are going to see it one way or the other. So here we go. This is the big one. The loophole, almost nobody talks about. If you're 55 or older, the VA highly restricts the raters from lowering your rating. That means, for example, you're safer when requesting increases. You're safer when filing for new claims. You're safer when challenging bad decisions or adding secondaries. You're safer, when appealing past lowball ratings. Now, I say that because you are safer in those instances. But keep in mind that if you've been service-connected for a condition, and let's say that, let's just use migraines, for example, okay? So migraines, you're either rated at a 0, a 10, a 30, or a 50. Now, I get it. Everyone wants to get to that 50 rating, and there's just as many people rated at 0 and 10 and 30. And right now, let's say you're at 30 and you want to make that jump to 50 because at 50, you're going to get to the 100 club. And let's say you filed for a claim for increase last year and it comes back as just a 30% evaluation. Now, depending on what's included in that rating narrative may determine whether or not you were lowballed or not. For example, if in that decision, if it says that, hey, we're going to confirm and continue this, if it hints at improvement was shown, but improvement was not sustained, then that indicates that your previous exam showed a lower than evaluation for the migraines, and that they would have reduced it had had the condition not been service connected for more than 5 years or 10 years. And if you then file a claim for increase again, or a supplemental claim, and they request a new exam and you go to it and it's been less than a year, less than 3 years, and that new exam shows exactly what the previous one did, that let's say a 10% evaluation was warranted, then the VA could at that point propose to decrease you. So while this can be a loophole, I'm saying, I'm trying to give you all the information so you can be smart about it. Okay. Keep in mind that with this loophole, that doesn't give you carte blanche to just go out and, request a claim for increase every 3 months until you get the decision that you want. Okay. Now, the VA, it's not supposed to reduce you unless these conditions are met, unless it's absolutely undeniable that there has been a medical improvement. If there's been multiple exams within a short period of time, then is it absolutely undeniable? Maybe not absolutely, but it's close. They're not supposed to reduce you, if there hasn't been an improvement in your daily functioning. It has to be sustained over time. It must reflect your capacity to work in your daily life, and it must pass multiple internal VA review checks. Now, some of those checks, the last one, just comes down to, as a few readers looked at it, has quality reviewed it. Now, they're not required to do it prior to an exam or prior to a decision being made, but one system of redundancy built in to VSRs and RVSRs who are working is this. They all should be kind of checking each other's work. Now, many don't do that. I'll be straight with you. Many don't. Some do, some don't, and it's unfortunate. Now, that's the part where, if there's multiple layers, if they're checking it, looking at it, some just don't know what they're looking at yet. Okay? Which is a whole other issue. Keep in mind, though, as far as this goes, as long as you're not submitting claims for increase every, 6 months, then I would say reductions are rarer. Increases are more likely. Filing is safer, which then expands, gives you the ability to get that increase. So once you hit 55, the VA rating system becomes less gotcha and more, okay, yeah, that tracks. All right. Now, I know that doesn't encompass everything that goes into the 55 and older rule. Okay. But essentially, and here's the pro tip for you. As long as you're not filing a claim for increase every 6 months, every year and a half, as long as it doesn't show that there's been sustained improvement, then they should at least confirm and continue the previous exam. They should not propose to reduce you, because there has to be that sustained improvement shown. Now, anything less than a year, multiple exams, I would say that's sustained improvement. Now, you could then argue that, hey, well, it's not sustained improvement because my quality of life hasn't gotten better. And that's fair. But what I would also do, as your buddy, is this. If you do your homework before you file a claim for increase, know how the condition you're applying for is evaluated. That way you can highlight those symptoms in your next C&P exam. If there's anything you take from this whole, this last loophole, is this. Do your homework before you file these claims for increase, because it will protect you that much more. For example, going back to our migraine example, if you looked in 38 CFR Part 4, we're talking about migraines and how it's evaluated. You'll see that to get the 50% evaluation, there has to be the prostrating headaches, and there has to then impair your ability to provide. It has to, the impairment has to be so much, it has to be great enough that it impairs your ability to earn. So if you're having a couple of those massive migraines, couple times a week to where you have to go and lie down, close your eyes because the light and the noise and all that becomes so extreme that you can't work, then yes, that's going to warrant the 50% evaluation. Now, knowing that going into your exam, you can then highlight those episodes that you have, which then increases your chances of getting that higher evaluation. All right. Went down the little road there, okay? But I think it's important that this information that I'm providing here is true and it upholds as long as you're being smart about the claims that you're filing. All right, claim advice. Claim advice is the segment where anyone can ask a question in any one of my videos, ask for a long form answer, just put claim advice, and I'll address it in a future video such as this. So, this was posed to me. I'm just going to read verbatim what it says. It says, advice, I'm already at 100% permanently, but I've been hearing several secondary conditions that I've not been rated for. Should I leave well enough alone, or should I consider filing for secondary? All right. So I would say this. I'm not going to tell you not to file a claim. If you feel like you have secondary conditions that are related to the primary one and you think you should be service connected for it, file a claim if you want to. Now, I would say this, kind of with the theme of the video here, be smart about it. Okay? Meaning, the worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario is if you filed for a claim and then they were looking at something else or found that something was granted in error and that 100% is going to be taken away. Now, I've seen it happen. It's not ideal and no one's happy. But if an error is seen, then it has to be addressed. The only thing I would say is this. If you're already at 100% permanent total, which means that dependents educational assistance has been granted, okay, then generally the only thing that you're filing for or hoping for, if you continue to file these claims, especially if conditions get worse, is, some sort of other ancillary benefit or special monthly compensation. Now, depending on what conditions you're service connected for, you may, even if 5 more conditions were granted, it still may not be enough to grant special monthly compensation. Okay. So if it's been granted on the loss of use criteria, which generally is granted with, erectile dysfunction, then, SMCK, loss of use, will be granted. To qualify for the housebound, you're going to need the one service-connected condition at 100% disabling, and then all of your other conditions would have to add up to 60% disabling. Now, that's one form of housebound. There's the other form of housebound, in fact, which basically is a whole other step. Basically, it's that your one service-connected condition essentially is high enough to impair your ability to work now, and that one is granted less often. I don't want to go down that road just because while you think it may apply to you, very rarely does it ever. And sometimes it needs to go to a higher level to get approved. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I just don't want to put pipe dreams in your head, which then leads to disappointment. Okay. I could talk about this at length, but it doesn't help you right now. All right. Now, there could be some other ancillary benefits, special adaptive housing, or special housing adaptation. Generally, to warrant those types of benefits, you have to have very specific conditions which impair your ability to move, or burns, burn scars, and the like. Okay. Now, the one other bit of advice I'm just going to throw out here. Okay. And like I said, keep in mind, I said, I'm not going to tell you not to file a claim. But, one thing my parents taught me is this. At some point, learning to be content with where you're at in life, I think, has to be good enough. Now, I'm not telling you to be content with where you're at, because each one of us are in a different boat. Hopefully we're, all heading in the same direction at a pace that we're comfortable with. Now, all that being said, there comes a point that, if you're right at 100% P&T, hoping for special monthly compensation at much higher levels, that just may add frustration to your daily life. So why continue to apply for that if it's just going to lead to greater frustration? I had someone email me not too long ago asking something similar to this as well. They're talking about going for the SMCK. Okay, now that SMCK, I think it adds roughly $130 to your monthly stipend. It's just a stipend, essentially. Okay, now the $130 sounds like a lot, but when reviewing your file, if let's say, for example, that they determine that there is an error and they're going to propose to reduce you from 100% to 90%, which then you would lose, that permanent total status. Now, the amount of money that you would lose over a year versus gained was huge. It was, and let me just do simple math here. Let's say it's $1,000 a month. It was the difference of, $12,000 versus, $1,300 or $1,800. In my email that I sent to this individual who emailed me a while back, I spelled it all out. But, in my mind, it's not worth it. But I'm not in the boat that you are. So it's up to you. But if you're already at 100% permanent total, I probably wouldn't file another claim. But like I said, it's up to you. I hope that answers your question. I just try to look at these questions from all possible angles. Now, I get it. People in the comments may say, hey, you're in left field, you're wrong about this. And that's fine. That's fair. We all, when looking at some of these, looking at the VA regulations, look at possibilities, we all have to consider and look at many things and can have different opinions on it all. That's an important thing to remember as well. Some of these raters too, the way that they look at evidence, the way that they evaluate the claim, as long as they can justify their decision, right or wrong, then that's the decision they make. I've seen plenty of instances where raters will look at the same file and come to slight variances between one file and the next. Between one, the same rater could look at the same file and come to slight variances of what the percentage they think the veteran should be service connected for in the radiculopathy, because it is more subjective. Okay. If they meet the mild criteria, it's 10. If they meet the medium or the moderate, it's 20. And what one rater thinks is mild, the other might say is moderate. Okay. Now, I've rambled on too long. I apologize. Feeling a little bit under the weather. So that was a little bit verbose, then my apologies, but I'd rather prepare you with too much information than not enough. All right, so those are the top 5 VA loophole veterans over 60 should know. These aren't shady, they aren't tricks, they aren't bending rules. They're built within the VA system, but almost no one ever really explains them. So if you're over 60, you're sitting on opportunities the VA will never call you about. But I mention it because you deserve every benefit that you have earned. Okay? Leave me a comment if you think I missed one. Leave me a comment if one of these surprised you. Do me a favor. Do all the YouTube things. Hit the like, subscribe. Okay? If you're watching on the app, please consider hyping the video. It really goes to help small creators such as myself. Okay? If you have something that you'd like me to address in a future claim advice, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. All right. As I mentioned, feeling a little bit under the weather, but I wanted to get this video out to you. So if you think I deserve it, give me a thumbs up at the least. In the end, just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. I'm Mr. X, and this is the VA Top 5.